up, sexy people? It is Dave. It is Duncan, back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from San Diego, California-based trio Matelotage. The band's new album, Seasick, will be released on October 13th on Collecting Dust Records. So, Seasick is the second full-length album from the band, which includes a lineup of scene veterans Jason Blackmore on guitar and vocals, Jade Devitt on drums, and Cole Mears on bass. The album was recorded by Gabe Van Ben Schoten and Roy Silverstein, produced by Jason Blackmore, and then mixed and mastered by Mario Quintero. So, while Matelotage are a new band.
We have confirmed that's how that's pronounced.
It is French for semen.
Semen?
Something to do with semen.
Semen?
I think so.
It's French for spunk.
Seamanship,
right.
I think it is. Or gay pirates or something. There's a few conflicting stories on the internet. Matelotage is how I think it's pronounced. I think it's French.
Let's just stick with that. Oh, dear.
So yeah,
ready for that.
While they are a new band to us, this is not the first time we've reviewed an album containing one of the band's members.
The Blackmore dude, or whatever his name was, rang a bell.
Yes, it
right,
should.
So
we recently reviewed an album called Leech Eater.
Yes.
By an atmospheric noise rock duo called Sisters.
Who are not named after the Brian De Palma movie of the same name.
Correct. That band
and I
also,
know that because the band reached out and told me that.
Yeah.
So
yes,
it's not because I've done like hours of research trying to work out. They came back and said, yes, we like De Palma. No, we're not named after that. We're actually named after this, and that makes more sense.
Yes. So that band also contains Jason Blackmore, who's in Molly Maguire, Rat's Eyes, Death Eyes, and Sisters. So it was Jason that gave us the head up, or a heads up on this release, and said it was kind of like a companion to Leech Eater in a way, and was also kind enough to give us the album for review. So thank you very much, much appreciated, sir. This album is also mapped out like the Sisters album. I feel like I need to mention this at the start because this is basically kind of like, it has like a side 1 and a side 2, like a vinyl basically, which we didn't realize actually Leech Eater was the same type of format. But
did
now
explain some stuff though, because
makes so much more sense. Yeah,
Dave, we may have raised some questions into the ether.
Yes, we did.
That required answers,
yeah.
And luckily for us, we're in a position where occasionally the artists that are involved in things we review check out what we say and then come back and answer those questions.
Absolutely. And so in Seasick, it's a similar format in that songs 1 to 5 are side 1 or side A, and then songs 6 to 8 are side B or side 2. And the idea is that the second side will take the listener on a different kind of type of journey.
Different voyage upon the sea.
Correct. So what I'm going to suggest here is, Duncan, just to shake things up a wee bit, is, I know we're about 500 reviews
this
in.
Backwards. Yes, Steve. I love.
What I'm going to suggest is we discuss side 1 first.
Oh,
tracks 1 to 5.
You are throwing caution to the wind here.
And then our thoughts on side B,
yep.
And then we can discuss the album as a whole piece. That's my thinking.
So what you're saying is, let's review this album 3 times. I like it, Dave.
Yes. 3 times a lady, Duncan. Let's do this. Starting off with side 1.
Why are you laughing already?
I don't think I was ready. I don't think I was prepared in the slightest for side 1 of this album. From what Jason had kind of hinted at, was it was going to be slightly heavier than Sisters, but I still wasn't prepared for just how fucking cool this was going to be. Holy shit! Right, this is.
He's fucking bouncing these chairs.
It's still okay. It's still got that kind of noise rock vibe that Sisters have. That a bit of that's still in there, but this is way more riff driven than Sisters is.
Sludgier for sure,
definitely. And as side one progresses, you can hear that kind of like sludge rock starting to kind of blend into the band's sound, which they do very, very well. And we mentioned this actually off air just before we started recording
like
this.
Unprompted off air, I may have thrown a band into the mix that it reminded me of at times. And as soon as I mentioned it, Dave smiled immediately because we've been friends for far too long.
Our brains were
we've been friends for far too long. And the thing is, I joked about this with you. I've mentioned this band in comparisons to bands this year about 3 or 4 times. And I can guarantee I have not mentioned them for a decade before that. So, like, I don't know what it is, but there's something this year where, like, either they were a decade ahead of their time, which they probably were, but, like, there's that, like, specifically on this, I was like, oh my good God almighty.
Yes. There's a few things that remind us of this band. This band's kind of style or version of that is maybe a little bit more noise rock infused.
I would agree.
It's not completely like exactly the same, but the band in question were a band called Scissorfight.
Who, if you've never heard of before, go and search out Scissorfight. I would say Man Trapping for Sport or Profit or Juggernaut, which was their second album. Both of them, chef's fucking kiss. And yeah, if they ever like reformed and wanted to tour with a band, the band they should tour with.
Scissorfight are still technically on the go. They put out an album 2 or 3 years back.
I don't know if they're still technically on the go. But I think they're more an albums band, which is not like a studio band, which is fine.
Possibly.
But yeah, the day they tour Scotland is the day that they're still a band.
So. That vibe though is all over this, and it's fucking awesome.
It's all about the groove. It's all about the groove riff. It's all about everything locks in at the groove. And the vocals does what they need to do over the top, and it's smoky and rich and fucking noisy.
It gets progressively more like that band as it goes on. The first track, All Rise, is probably more on the noise rock side of things. It's got a bit more of a kind of punkier speed, more like kind of abrasive tones in the guitar. Although there's a little southern riff that kind of drops in just for a wee short segment, and you're like, oh, where did that come from? And then it disappears again. It's like, but then you're thinking, oh, wait a minute, that's kind of opened the door here a little bit for a little bit more of that. Clever. I see what you're doing there. And then String 'Em Up opens in a kind of similar fashion where you get little hints of like Helmet or even like Melvins. There's a little bit of Queens of the Stone Age in there.
Yes.
But it's kind of woven with these like bigger, kind of thicker, kind of sludge rock riffs. And it was that track where I was like, there's a little bit of a Scissorfight vocal technique where it's...
Is that Scissorfight at the door? And then track 3 comes along and kicks on your police batting through the door.
That
unreal, man.
String 'Em Up's got that kind of like the kind of layered vocal where it's like a mix of like a shout and a spoken word, which Scissorfight do a lot. And then in comes the Befuddled Pig, where
in comes the Befuddled Pig.
Yeah, I literally about fucking fell off my chair.
It's so Scissorfight. And the best part, like, I'm so happy because that album, like, that sound from that band is now over a decade old.
Yes.
And no one does it.
No
one does it. And you know who does? These guys.
That's right. Matelotage. It's southern.
This is where the guys send us a message like that. We've never heard of Scissorfight before. We're back to them. Got that. Be prepared to find out your new favourite band. Slide it right into the DMs.
Oh Jesus! The riff on the Befuddled Pig is just
huge,
fucking incredible. It is southern. It's groove laden. And it's just a chef's kiss of a main riff. My neighbours loved it. My dog loved it. It was just like, man. Just when it kicked in, I was so into this. I was like absolutely locked in. and that track, like that's when the guitars really hit me. I was like, listen to that guitar, man. It's like
Huge.
sludgy and full of weight. The bass also sounds fantastic on this, though. I have to say, it's got that kind of like really clangy metallic tone that you can hear like grinding just beneath the riffs, like just alongside the riffs, and it's just awesome. The drums are kind of like just grooving like a son of a bitch. Vocally, again, that track's got that kind of the Scissorfight type spoken word effect, but it's alongside something more melodic in the chorus, which gives it a bit more of a hook. And there's some little kind of sections of vocals which have some like effects on them. But I thought that was really clever because it helped kind of distinguish all the different parts of the track. Just like definite highlight on the album for me. I loved the Befuddled Pig. I thought it was fantastic. Pink Misty Mountain Hop, though, it comes in with, again, big fucking grizzly southern sludge vibe. A bit slower in tempo. The vocals are a little bit more quirky on this one, but again, some really nice melodic moments throughout the tracks as well. It sounds huge, and
it's kind of what would happen if Scissorfight and CKY had a fucking baby. It's got the riff itself, like, and even that quirky vocal reminded me a lot of kind of early day Disengage the Simulator, CKY, but with the southern tone of like a Scissorfight. And it sounds fucking huge. Like I can't straight like that. You know, like it's the riff sounds like a fucking like an elephant, like carrying a fucking grand piano up a flight of stairs because the escalator's broken. It's just like it's fucking huge and heavy sounding, man, and it makes me smile.
Very, very, very catchy, like just really like infectious. Like infectious is fucking chlamydia, like just that kind of. So I've heard anyway.
See, very catchy. You say. So
Gone is the kind of final part of side one, which brings sense. Brings the tempo back up. Still got that absolutely ripping bass tone. It's cool though. It's got a little bit more of like a bit more kind of alternative sound in some of the chord choices, which makes it a little different. But it kind of also makes sense because knowing that there's a kind of change coming up on the second kind of part of the album. So I felt like it was a really good transitional track into kind of side two of the album. What do you think of side one? What did you think of the first 5 tracks? Anything that you want to add?
What's not to fucking like here? Like, like we mentioned it before. Like this is it's almost as if the band like sat with a clipboard of things, like with checkboxes of things that will make me and you happy. Knowing our musical taste, and then delivered it really, really, really well. I think the first half is awesome. I think it starts and closes very different from the middle 3 songs, but not hugely different. There's still that link in tissue, but All Rise is a great fucking intro, and Gone is a great way to bring things out. And then String 'Em Up, The Befuddled Pig, and Pink Misty Mountaintop are just 3 back-to-back stone cold fucking bangers. As a like knowing the split and whatnot, it makes a lot of sense because Gone does feel like it's bringing things down. And then Fuck the Sun, which is a great name for a song. And the first one like that literally feels like it literally feels like you're being accosted by a heavyset person. It's what a cop I feel. You know what I mean? So it's just like, what am I doing here? It feels like being crushed at a gig. You know, that way where you're just like, I have no control over anything. This was a bad idea. I wish I stood at the back. So yeah, like from that looping thing, it really, really makes sense. Plus, like those 5 songs have there's a concise nature about them. They're all almost pretty much in or around either short or single length. Whereas the last 3 tracks are where the band explores, which is really, really, really cool. So you get that kind of B-side mentality on it. So yeah, I was already in, already fully in.
And what did you think of side 2? What did you make of that part of the album?
So like, Fuck My Son starts off with like the most disgustingly slow, monstrous riff. You know what I mean? In fact, actually, that's the in a lot of respects, the tail of the tape, as they use in the UFC, the tail of the tape on the back half of the album is something is much more measured, much more deliberate, and like heavier.
Yeah,
like that is where they find they have an extra gear, extra layer of heaviness.
I felt like they went a little bit more angular on that track as well.
Yeah.
Like some of the riffs are a little bit more kind of like janky or something, you know what I mean? It was just like a little bit more off-piste in places. Same with the vocals. I felt like the vocals were a little bit more like, reminded me of Mike Williams a little bit from I Hate God. Just a very unusual tone and style, which was kind of...
It's a shorter song as well, so it's like, it opens at like it's like just under 3 minutes, and it has an intensity and a burst about it, which you're like, all right, here we go. And then I love the closing 2 songs. So Seasick, which is the title song, is kind of spacey and ethereal. It plays with a lot more room. The Sims themselves, the vocals have like a, can't remember what that was, almost like a phaser or like a flange or something on them, where they feel like they're almost underwater.
Yeah.
Which I love about it. It's just like kind of has that vibe.
Yeah.
And it's the first track on the entire album where I actually felt like these guys have a kind of prog feel that they've kind of been holding back on. Difficult not to mention the word Mastodon, but there is a kind of Mastodon-y vibe there. Doesn't sound like Mastodon, but the idea of how they incorporated elements specifically into Leviathan, where you were listening to chords and you were like, why does that sound like it's on the ocean when nothing else? Just the way it's picked, the way it's played, the sound it has. Seasick is a great song. It's a long song as well. It's at the 6 minute mark, not the longest, but it's the band opened the space right up. So everything isn't like tight and groovy and all the rest. It's more about kind of weirdly about finding your levels as you're on a boat. Which is what I felt like when I was listening. Even the pace kind of felt like a boat rocking backwards and forwards. I loved that about it. So it's kind of great. And then you switch into the very end, which is Mayday, the closing track. It clocks in at a whopping 9 minutes long, and is more... I love bands that do... We've spoken about this before. I don't mind bands using the last track as a bit of experimentation. This one has that vibe. That's kind of... This is the dark closer of the album. This is, if you're following the voyage through everything, this is the cry for help at the end, and the music certainly captures that. There's a kind of a very desperate sort of almost resigning yourself to the inevitable about it, which I really, really like. The guitar work is excellent because you've got like a really, really cool central riff, but then it starts going on some lead work, and it really works in it all the way through it. The production, especially in the back half as well, that bass sound just locks everything in. Just like you, Mr. Guitar Man, you just go for a wander. Everything's fucking tight here. Drum and bass work on this is locked in a way which just, it needs to be that way for everything else to kind of work. Vocally, Mayday is really, really cool as well. Like there's a repetitive motif that's used over and over again that kind of works with it as well. And it closes super strong. It closes different but super strong. You're getting a different side of the sound, but not so jarring that it sounds like a different band. And actually, weirdly, it merits the sound overall. The beauty of Mayday as well is towards the end as well, they introduce some of those kind of Scissorfight-y, southerny sort of riffs in again, but not prolonged. It just becomes like an accent on what they're doing. And then finishes great. What about yourself? Back half,
I really enjoyed. The last 2 tracks were super cool. Like as you said, much slower in tempo, and start to kind of blend in this more kind of dreamy, atmospheric kind of rock vibe. It's probably most alike in terms of comparisons to Jason's other band, Sisters. Although on track 7, the title track, it's actually the drummer, Jade Devitt, that does the vocals on that track. He does vocal parts, which I thought was really cool. And it's a different tone to Jason's on the album, which he's got a bit more of a kind of 90s, like almost like post-hardcore noise rock kind of vibe in his voice and melody. Whereas Jade was doing something it's a bit more clean, you know. It's got that kind of more silky, almost kind of that kind of Josh Homme of Queens of the Stone Age kind of type vibe. But then when I heard that, I realised that it was probably Jade that was doing a lot of the other kind of vocal layers that you could hear earlier in the album, because it was like two different tones. But it's a great switch, great feel. I love the tempo of it. Shows a bit more control from the band, and that they can do something much more reflective and expansive at the same time. Same with the closing track, Mayday. They continue to kind of expand on the kind of smoky atmospheric side. Very spacious, a lot darker in tone, like you said. A little bit more experimental in the guitar work. Some nice kind of building moments. There's a bit of a kind of... I noticed there's like a little bit more of a kind of grungy characteristic in some of the vocals on the last track as it kind of progresses, which was cool. But when I got to the end of it, I was kind of like... My kind of feelings was... It gave you a different side to the band sound, which I thought was super cool. So it was like, depending on your mood, you've either got this kind of like handful of riffy, groovy bangers, or you've got that kind of like 15 minutes or so of moody, expansive kind of noise rock. But together it does work. Like as a whole piece, I actually thought they linked it all together really well. You know, they hint at enough elements that they do end up fully embracing later on the album. So I felt like, even though there is a switch and you can hear the sound change, I felt like it linked together really well. What did you feel? Is that like a whole piece? Did you think it worked?
Yeah, I do as well. Like, not knowing that before, I think Gone is actually the perfect transition into Fuck the Sun.
Yeah.
I think, once again, with albums of this genre, I tend to feel it's the Mastodon thing comes out again, and that Mastodon were always, maybe less so nowadays, but certainly in their earlier incarnation, were always really, really, really good at hitting you with a lot of build up in the front half, and then being really comfortable towards the end to go somewhere else and paint another picture of something. Conceptually, that always really worked for me, and I think it works really well on this one. I would actually go one step further and say that I actually think it works a little bit better on this release than it does on the Sisters album, which obviously we had questions about, but I didn't feel there was the same almost unseen split on that one. I think the split here, whilst it is obvious when you think about it, at the same time, the transference of tracks afterwards are actually still relatively well in keeping with what you get before. It's just a progression on the ideas that the band have set out in the first 5 songs. So, to me, it hangs together really, really, really well. Yeah,
I also quite like that, although there are comparisons to other bands, I'm not sure I've heard other bands mix it all together like this in one.
No, the closest I got was that it reminded me of Scissorfight. Like, predominantly reminded me of Scissorfight, an obscure band that I guarantee no one fucking listens to, right? But the rest of the stuff, all the other stuff we've mentioned here, there's an influence. There's a pinch, but it's not really, you would never say, oh, you like Queens of the Stone Age. You know, you should listen to. It's not that way. It's just, there's a vague memory. There's something in the background that kind of makes you remember a sound on a track or a song from another band without being the sound of another band.
I think the other reason this works really well for me is the production of the album. I think it's the heavy stuff is really, really thick and really fuzzed out with such a really cool groove, packs a punch. So like props to Gabe and Roy and Jason and Mario, who was the drummer in Sisters, also in Spotlights. The album as a whole has a great production, really good quality to it. The bass is most definitely my favourite here on the album. I think it sounds incredible. The tone is killer. And saying that, the snare also slaps like a motherfucker. I like the snare sound as well. It's another well-paced, well-thought-out release from Jason and the guys. He's a talented son of a bitch, actually, isn't he?
Some guys are just bursting with talent, and we will never hate them for it.
I think if you liked the Sisters album, we reviewed that back in August, I think it was, you can check that out, then I think there's elements here that you'll definitely you'll enjoy, they'll appeal to you, but Also, if you fancy something with just a bit of fucking grit and muscle to it, this has the riffs to show you a really good time as well. There's some fucking banging tracks on this album. Scores for the new album from Matelotage. What are you thinking on this one?
So I gave, if memory serves, I gave Sisters a 4. I preferred this to Sisters. I think it's cohesively more in sync, so I would give this a 4.5.
Yeah.
I think this is fucking awesome, man. Honestly, this is the sort of thing where I've spun it a lot more than I generally do review copies of other albums.
Yeah.
Mostly because it just is very, very easy for me to listen to in the same way that Scissorfight album is, Dave, where I've listened to that album, like, honestly, if you were to track it, like, hundreds of times since I first got it. And there's a reason, but there's nothing in it that at any point I'm like, I need to kind of be in the mood to listen to this. No, it's an any mood album. So 4.5.
Yeah, I scored Sisters 4.5. I feel like this is on par with that album, so I'm going to go 4.5 again. I think I like them for different reasons. It's weird. Like
they are very different bands, but at the same time weirdly connected.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think overall I enjoyed the journey more on the Sisters album, but there's so many satisfying moments on this album that I was just like, oh, that's so fucking good. And it's not even overly predictable either. You know, it's really interesting the way they've kind of formatted this album. And laid it out and delivered such an excellent production in it as well. I think it sounds incredible. I'm going to go 4.5 on this one as well. So that's the new album from Matelotage. It's called Seasick. It's out on October 13th on Collecting Dust Records. Links below to the band.
And named after a Brian De Palma. No. Not going there.
That'll happen one day. One day, Duncan. Links below to the band, the pre-order. Check it out. Let us know what you think. Happy to hear your thoughts on it. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.